Welcome back to Memory Lane Media, where we take you on heartfelt journeys through the past. Today, we're looking beyond the polished image of the 1950s, past the chrome kitchens, family sitcoms, and suburban dreams, to explore a side of that decade not always shown in picture books. This is the untold truth of the 1950s. The decade began with war. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and American troops were sent to intervene. It was the first military action of the Cold War, a war against the forces of international communism. By the time it ended in 1953, 40,000 American soldiers had died, and over 100,000 were wounded. At home, a different kind of fear was spreading: the Red Scare. Senator Joe McCarthy led a wave of anti-communist paranoia, launching public witch hunts against supposed subversives in government, schools, and even Hollywood. People feared enemies not just from abroad, but from within their own communities. With Cold War tensions rising, American schools began duck and cover drills, where children crouched under their desks, bracing for a nuclear blast. Fallout shelters were built in backyards. Survival guides were printed and distributed. People lived under the shadow of atomic fear. It might sound shocking now, but in the 1950s, it was perfectly acceptable for pregnant women to smoke or drink alcohol. Doctors even offered cigarettes during appointments. The risks, low birth weight, developmental delays, respiratory damage, were simply unknown at the time. The era also carried a heavy stigma around unwed pregnancies. Young women were often sent away to secretly give birth, only to surrender their babies to closed adoptions. These adoptions left many children with unanswered questions, and many mothers with silent grief. Lead poisoning was another hidden danger. Though lead paint was prized for its durability, its toxic effects, especially on young children, were poorly understood. Exposure led to illness, memory loss, and intellectual disabilities, often without warning. When it came to mental health, lobotomies were seen as a miracle cure. Surgeons severed connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex in hopes of treating mental illness. But the results were often devastating. Patients left with irreversible damage, sometimes worse than the illness itself. Those with disabilities or mental illness had few options. Many were placed in overcrowded asylums, where they suffered neglect, isolation, and abuse. Society had little room and less understanding for those who were different. Polio haunted every parent in the early 1950s. Summer brought fear as the virus struck without warning. Each year, over 15,000 children were paralyzed. It wasn't until 1955, with the introduction of a vaccine, that hope began to return and polio cases began to decline. The fight against racial segregation was also taking root. In 1954, the landmark case Brown v. Board of Education ruled that segregated schools were inherently unequal. A year later, Rosa Parks' quiet act of defiance on a Montgomery bus sparked a 13-month boycott that would help ignite the civil rights movement. But not all resistance to change came from the government. A wave of moral panic swept the suburbs, especially with the rise of rock and roll. Parents feared the music was too suggestive, and worse, that it brought black and white teenagers together in ways that challenged the status quo. Discipline in the home and classroom was harsh by today's standards. Corporal punishment was not only common, it was expected. Belts, paddles, and bare hands were used to correct behavior, and most children from that time can still recall the sting of a spanking, or what they called licks. The 1950s were not just an age of optimism and prosperity. Beneath the surface, there were deep fears, painful injustices, and outdated practices that left lasting scars. But understanding this fuller picture helps us appreciate not just how far we've come, but also how much the people of that era endured. If this video brought back memories or revealed something you never knew, leave us a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Memory Lane Media, where we remember the past, one story at a time.